Hello, everybody. Welcome to This Week in Drones Tuesday edition. I'm your host, Joshua, and I'm really excited to be joined by Chief Lowe. And he is going to be telling us a little bit about how they started their DFR program and some of the process that it took to get that off the ground, and also, kind of what recommendations you'd have for, folks who are looking to start a DFR program of their own. So without further ado, Chief Lowe, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, Josh, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be on and share the Redmond Police Department's DFR story with you guys.
Great. So tell me a little bit about, kind of what inspired you to get into drones and, how your program got kicked off.
Thank you. So I've been the chief in Redmond since 2019. I came here from California, down in Santa Monica, California for 27 and a half years. We had a drone program down there, so I was familiar with drone as a first responder, or what we refer to as DFR 1.0, where you had, the pilot, but you also had to have a visual observer up on the roof. And so I had some familiarity, with the idea and the concept. Here in Redmond, we had a drone program back in 2018, but it was the typical public safety program, in the sense of it was traffic accident reconstruction or documentation, the occasional missing person. Fast forward, I was fortunate enough to have a sergeant and an officer who were very passionate about drones, and came to me with the idea, of DFR. Having had experience with it, I just opened up the floodgates and let them run with it. Sent them around the country to various drone conferences. They got an opportunity to fly just about every platform that was out there, and then we started to build our program. So back in April of 2024 is when we started the pilot for our drone program. And we essentially pieced it together in the sense of we took a DJI Dock 2, got some computer monitors, and set it all up. At that time, we still needed the visual observer, which is which was one of the challenges from a staffing perspective, because you have to have your pilot, you have to have your observer, and police officers are very expensive. We were fortunate enough to be one of the first on the West Coast to get the BV waiver, and that was at the time when they were taking quite some time to approve. I'm happy to say that the FAA is working very earnestly, and I understand now the process takes a couple weeks as opposed to 6 or 7 months. So we ran that pilot program so I could get the data to take to my city council to justify or to ask for the funding for the actual full-time DFR program. So after running it for several months, having some successes, we were able to take that to the council. During that time period while we were running the pilot, I entered into several conversations and negotiations with several of our American-made vendors. We agreed to become a developmental partner for a local company that is, in this space. Fast forward, when it came time for the actual deployment, we were approached by another prominent, American drone maker. We have their platform as well. And so we've now, to date, run 1,168 missions here in the city of Redmond. And then we are the only full-time DFR program in the state. There are a couple of other cities that have gotten approval for DFR and then are in the procurement process. But to my knowledge, we are the only ones flying about 14 hours, 12 to 14 hours a day, depending on staffing.
What kind of missions are you running? I know you had mentioned earlier you have where there's an accident, going to sending a drone out to observe that, search and rescue. Can you tell me maybe a couple of stories offhand of some of the missions that you ran? Maybe if there's like a natural disaster or something where it was difficult to reach people, how you'll use drones to help those folks?
Yeah, so I allow our pilots to fly on any call for service. So I don't limit it to just accidents or a specific type of call. So any call for service that comes in is eligible for drone flight at the pilot's discretion. A couple of big wins and successes that we've had. We had a 88-year-old citizen wander away from his house in the middle of the night. Was diabetic. Typical search. I'll say the typical search and rescue pattern. We were looking for the individual. The pilot, understanding that the individual was 88 years old, had some mobility challenges, realized that he likely didn't get very far. But here in Redmond and Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of trees, there's a lot of blackberry bushes, a lot of foliage and thicket. So the pilot was able to fly and using the thermal imaging of the camera. And that was a challenge also because during daylight, the image is just very bright, so it's just white. Well, lo and behold, he saw a little black dot in his image. It turns out the gentleman was bald, so his bald head helped us save him by way of thermal imaging because it showed up as a little black dot. And so we were able to direct the officers in. The gentleman had walked down a pathway and it was an embankment and he had just sat down. The officers had searched that, but the growth around him was so tall that they never saw him. Even when the officer was being directed in by the pilot, he's like, "Where is he? I don't see him." He was literally 3 feet away, but in the thicket. And so for those that want to see actual footage, it is actually on our website. The other, I'll call it big win, two of them real succinctly. We were able to assist with a canine track for a subject that was in the woods. And the same thing, you have a perimeter set up, you have a dog on a lead going for the search, but it's going to take some time for the dog to acquire the scent and figure out exactly where he was. Or in this case, we had the drone overhead using thermal imaging. We said, "Stop to your right." He's right there. The dog barked. The subject gave up. And then probably one of the biggest wins, I'll call it, for a DFR that helps to justify, this type of program. We had a call of a subject with a gun in a courtyard pointing it at his neighbor. He had no idea that the drone was overhead watching him. The gentleman was on the phone with 911. Fortunately, he complied with the dispatcher's directions to disarm himself. But the drone pilot was able to see where he threw the gun in the bushes. So when the contact team was there, they were able to know that this person was unarmed at the time, confirmed by a police officer because all of my pilots are commissioned police officers. So they were able to slow down, de-escalate their response to this subject. But equally as important, we knew exactly where the gun had been discarded because had we not had the drone overhead, and he says, "Yeah, I don't have the gun," now we have to keep an apartment complex locked down for an extended period of time, either do a physical search or bring in a canine for an article search. So this expedites calls. It provides clear real-time information for officers on the ground. And then for us, we've been able to cancel our ground response in about 19% of the calls because, again, I have commissioned police officers as my pilots. So they're able to establish probable cause. They're able to understand whether or not we do, in fact, have a criminal matter or not, or we can just observe from, 250 feet in the air and make sure that a person's okay.
Yeah, I know, for obviously the police do, it can be very dangerous, right? Going into a situation where you don't know if somebody's armed or not. So being able to use drones to establish situational awareness seems like a really powerful use case that I've heard people doing that a little bit, but it sounds like you guys have really had some real world experience doing that. Have you found that you've had other situations where maybe you thought somebody was armed, you were able to send a drone in to kind of confirm that before you send officers in, or is that kind of become common practice for you?
Yeah, we also use them for interior searches. So a lot of times now we have multiple platforms that we can operate. So we do have patrol deployed drones. And typically those would be the ones that we would use for interior searches, of buildings and things. Obviously, it's much easier to send a drone into a crawl space than having a human pop head. And so we use it in that manner as well. But we don't just use it for police-related issues. We also use it as a citywide resource. So that's another, I'll say key aspect or key
Mhm.
selling point for departments or chiefs or sheriffs looking, to start up a DFR program. It's not just a public safety application. So, for example, we had a circumstance at a construction site where they saw a bird nest on a crane over a long weekend. So we have bald eagles up here, which are endangered. So they wanted to ensure that, they saw that it was the eagle's nest. They wanted to make sure that there were no eggs or birds in the nest. And before they allowed the construction to continue,
Mhm.
we were able to fly that drone mission, able to do it, safely, from above the nest, zoom in, and we could see that there were no eggs there, there were no birds there, so we didn't have any, not so much environmental issues, but we didn't have
Yeah.
those types of issues. We were also able to use it in a weather-related event where we had a bomb cyclone. So we were
Wow.
able to actually fly neighborhoods and identify houses that actually had trees on or in the houses, which helps both our fire department and our planning department know which houses need to be red or green tagged because you have overlap or duplication of services. So
Mhm.
instead of having two different crews go out and replicate the work, we were able to provide them with an aerial perspective to both departments, and so it definitely helps streamline operations across the city.
When you're talking about citywide, use cases, have you worked at all with the fire department? Because I know some fire departments will use or the thermal cameras to kind of look at fires and see where they're burning hotter or colder. Have you been able to work with them yet, or is that still something you're looking to do in the future?
Yeah, great question, Josh. So yes, we also work with our fire department. We recently deployed on a structure fire, and we were able to send a live image to the battalion chief's rig, and that way they could see where the hot spots were, in the fire. We've also done that from a patrol deploy perspective. We've been able to send out, put a drone up and then have the infrared feed for the fire department for hotspots. Unfortunately, we had one of our strip malls
Mhm.
burn up in its entirety. So that's a long operation, a
Wow.
long cleanup operation. So we were able to go out and support the fire department, in that aspect as well.
It sounds like you're probably running one of the most efficient drone as first responder programs in the area. You get kind of covering everybody. That's amazing. I'm glad to hear that. And just I don't think people realize how effective drones can be to, you know, make your officers' lives easier. Have a safer work environment, but also help the whole community. Have Where do you guys looking to do in the future? Are there future projects you'd like to do? Maybe incorporating other cities, or what do you want to do in the future with your program?
Yeah, I would love to see a regional aspect or regional component to it because the program is not inexpensive. And
Hmm.
while some think that every department will have some aspect or version of DFR, and that may or may not be the case. But if we can combine resources, especially now with the autonomous flight capability of many of
Hmm.
the platforms, and the docked solutions, I believe
Hmm.
it's possible. And then as the technology gets better, as battery life increases, then that will allow more airtime. I was having a
Hmm.
conversation with a colleague out of the Chicago area, and he was sharing with me that they have a concept right now of, I want to say it's 40 cities and 15 drones, and I might have it flipped around, but they're basically having all the departments that have
Hmm.
pilots operate these dock drones autonomously and remotely throughout the entire region. So it's going to be very interesting to see the outcome of this particular project because it will prove the concept, and I think that
Hmm.
that will just be better for the industry as a whole. Because of course, from a vendor perspective, they want every department to have it, but we need to
Hmm.
think, I'll say both bigger and broader, and then the regionalization approach and concept I think is
Hmm.
very viable for the future of DFR.
Have you worked with the Drone as First Responder organization? I think Charles Werner's the head of that. Are you familiar with those guys, or Have you spoken with them before?
I am familiar with them. I know I've talked to a couple different agencies, the Law Enforcement Drone Association. We just hosted their Pacific Northwest training a
Mhm.
couple months ago. Um,
Yeah, it's just one thing I've enjoyed about being more involved with law enforcement and first responder groups is that I feel like everybody's in it together, right? You're all, if you can help each other, you're not trying to hide the ball or have your secret sauce that you keep to yourself. But I've always really appreciated that. It's a very sharing community, and even you coming on the show and talking about your experiences, I've always really appreciated that about law enforcement, how you're all working together. But no, that's exciting. Do you foresee yourself using drones as for, because I know, do you have remote areas in Redmond where you might want to, carry loads, like maybe using drones to carry, emergency food to somebody who's might be stuck out in like a mudslide or something like that? Or is that something that you guys would want to do in the future, maybe using larger drones that are carrying bigger loads to kind of remote areas, or is that not as much of an issue for you guys out there?
well, for Redmond, we do have some remote areas, and one of the platforms that we are operating does have a payload capability. So I could see from a practical application perspective, like the Narcan, the EpiPen,
Hmm.
perhaps the self-inflatable life jacket, because we do have a couple lakes here, in Redmond or adjacent to Redmond, where that may be viable. The challenge I see with that is when you start talking payload, now you're starting to talk
Yeah.
larger airframe, and then from a noise perspective, given that we have our VV waiver, at that point you're talking, a much higher altitude. You're talking a
Hmm.
different infrastructure setup. But I also know that we are on the cusp of commercial drone delivery here in Redmond.
Yeah.
So we will be standing up an Office of Airspace Management and starting to go down that path to actually be able to effectively and safely manage our airspace with the introduction of commercial drone delivery. So that too is the next phase for drones.
Are you all working at all with any like utilities in the area? Because I've spoke with some folks, maybe more on the Gulf, where their DFR program will also maybe look at an oil rig to make sure there's no leaks with some of their thermal cameras, or maybe work with a water treatment plant. Have you worked at all with critical infrastructure in that way, or any other like energy? I don't know if there's a lot of energy production in your area, but
Not in Redmond proper. So we, obviously we do have big utility companies, and I'm not sure if they are utilizing, drones for line inspections or anything like that. But that's definitely also another, area or another possibility, for us. Redmond is very tech centered or a very tech heavy community, and
Mhm.
I believe it's something like 90+% of low orbit satellite
Well,
components and things are designed, developed here in Redmond. So we do have a number of what I would consider intellectual critical
mhm.
infrastructure. And so we are in the process of having conversations, with those companies and with their security teams about, airspace awareness, airspace
Mhm.
management, because counter drone is another area that I think we need to focus on intentionally, and then specifically from a training component for law enforcement, and then to then figure out what type of interdiction or mitigation
Mhm.
can be allowable. Last week, I was fortunate to have a congressman come out on our program, and we started, having that conversation. I believe he's the ranking member of the Transportation and Infrastructure group or whatnot, and that's a very big concern, and it was acknowledged. But it was also acknowledged that obviously, presently only the feds have the ability to take something out of the sky, and that's not necessarily something that I'm, you know, heavily advocating for, but we have to have a solution for that, because we've seen a number of, what I would call rogue or suspicious, drone
Mhm.
activity. We've seen the capability of what a weaponized drone can do, from some of the conflicts, overseas.
Mhm.
And so we need to be very proactive, in that space, but we need to do it I'll say intelligently. We can't do it from a knee-jerk reaction perspective. We need to be deliberate and intentional about it, but we need to address it. We can't ignore what we know to be true, and then responding
Mhm.
to the pieces after the fact.
No, I very much agree. And again, this topic can be a little bit nuanced. So just for the audience, it's the airspace is owned by the FAA. So anything that's flying, if you were to mitigate it, it's considered to be like federal airspace. So you're essentially committing a federal crime when you take a drone down, even if it's flying a few feet off the ground, it's still in the FAA's airspace. So I've had actually some different lawyers. This is one of the topics I'm very interested in. The concept of the first one is can you potentially mitigate drones using self-defense as a way to kind of overcome that federal charge of destroying an aircraft. The second one, which is maybe a little bit more theoretical, and again, this is just talking theory. So if anybody out there is looking to mitigate a drone, don't or talk to your lawyer before you do it, because you'll be in a lawsuit with the FAA. So definitely talk to your lawyers. But another kind of theoretical option could be police use of force, because obviously, as a police officer, if a car is driving towards you and you can shoot out its tires, right? Or if somebody has a gun, you can potentially even use lethal force on them, right? So could there be that same theory applied to a drone that's, let's say you're in a prison and a drone has a payload. Let's say you have a camera on it. You see as a payload with, fentanyl. You can see like a little white bag hanging down underneath it, or maybe just something that you don't know what it is. So it could be fentanyl. And if that bag falls on the ground, it could explode and, kill a lot of people if it, goes into the air. So, in those situations, as a, law enforcement agent, would you have the ability to use force like you would on a car or another kind of vehicle? And I guess the piece that becomes, the gray area is, always that, well, it's the federal government's airspace, the FAA airspace. But yeah, I mean, obviously, this is just theoretical, but do you have any opinions on those pieces, or have you talked to folks about kind of, using self-defense or use of force against drones, or is that something you've ever considered?
Yeah, as you said, Josh, this is a very nuanced space, and again, we have to be very intentional and deliberate about it, and not just shoot for the shoot from the
Mhm.
hip, no pun intended, because you do have something falling out of the sky, and so
Exactly.
safety of individuals on the ground is also of top concern. Now, I think situation dependent or specific. If it's
Mhm.
over a critical infrastructure facility, you typically don't have a lot of people in and around that area. A prison yard is what I would say ideally a controlled environment. So I think there are
Mhm.
some circumstances where it would be more applicable or more prudent. But from my perspective as a municipal, police chief, I would be very concerned about, okay, if we take, defensive, actions to take something or to mitigate, a rogue, airframe, where is it going to land, right?
Yeah.
Does that drone have a parachute like my drones do from a safety perspective? And if so, okay, but then are we going to know that before we, interdict or try and take it out?
Mhm.
So, as I said, I think there's a lot of conversation, to be had. Obviously, from a policy perspective, there needs to be policy, at the federal level. To my knowledge, I believe there are a couple states that have passed some state laws that allow
Mhm.
for drones to be, taken out of the sky. And so, like many things, we may have to wait and see how this plays out, in the court to get
Yeah.
the proper rulings and direction. But I think a much more prudent and proactive way to go about it would be to get the right people in the room at a table to start having these conversations, to look at it from a number of different perspectives. Clearly my perspective is from
Mhm.
that of a municipal police chief. There could be a very different perspective from an administrator from the FAA. I know I've been present for a number of vendor demonstrations, and of course they are researching and developing in anticipation of something changing within this space, and so that when those changes, or if those changes occur, they're ready to come to market, with the product, for all of us. So we'll all get the next new shiny, toy within, someone's ecosystem, and that's fine. But again, I just think we need to be very, specific, deliberate, and intentional about how we go about this.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you'd mentioned, I think Louisiana is one of the states that recently passed a law about being able to mitigate drones, but it's still federally illegal. So it'd be kind of similar case to like when marijuana legalization, right? Technically you can do it, but then it's still federally illegal. So then you have to have those lawsuits, and I think that'll be interesting. I think everybody who's looking at the mitigation side is waiting for some of the folks in Louisiana or some of those different states that pass a law to start mitigating some drones to see kind of what those court cases will kind of determine, because I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, is if the courts are going to have to adjudicate it. But it's still it's an interesting situation. I think if the best case scenario for a mitigation would probably be that prison environment, because it's already regulated airspace. So you're not really allowed to fly over, at least certain prisons. You're not allowed to fly over if they're holding, national security risk folks, like a cartel, leader, or something like that. So, there is already some situations there. But at the end of the day, if you mitigate a drone, it causes more harm than if you just let it go and leave. Then, I think that's ultimately the FAA's concern is that, if you have drones falling out of the sky and hitting people, then that's a lot worse than having a couple of drones, filling up the airspace. But it's a great topic to talk about. Out of curiosity, and obviously some of this you might not be able to share, but have you seen prisons in your area having issues with like contraband, or is that something you've heard about at all on the West Coast? Because I know the East Coast I've heard a lot about. I know Georgia, they had a big bust of almost like a Uber for drone delivery into prisons network, which was pretty wild. Have you guys seen that at all on the West Coast, or have you kind of seen anything like that?
Fortunately, I don't have a prison facility here in Redmond, but I have seen some demonstrations from some vendors that have tracked some prison facilities in the West Coast, and I believe down in California specifically, where I have seen the demonstrations of it, and then that is a concern just from from correctional partners and whatnot.
It's definitely, the more drones become common, I guess, there's awesome uses and then maybe some not so great uses. So keep on seeing that. But that kind of leads into another question I had for you. One thing I've heard from DFR programs is how important it is to engage the community, because ultimately, if the community is afraid of you flying drones, or there's just people don't like seeing a drone flying around thinking it's looking at them, right? There's kind of that underlying feeling that's spying on you, even though it's probably doesn't care, right? It's just it might not even have an optical camera. It might be thermal or lidar, so it might not even see you really. But what ways have you guys engaged the community to build trust and to really allow you to have such a flourishing drone program?
So for us, and especially here in the Pacific Northwest, privacy and surveillance concerns are at top of mind anytime you talk about a public safety technology. So for us, it was the typical community engagement, being very open and transparent about what it is we were doing. One of the key factors I believe in my success with getting the both buy-in from the community and the approval of my legislative body was, for us, we have our camera set at the horizon. So when we launch, we are not looking at the ground. We are looking at the horizon. As we arrive at the call, the pilot will then rotate the gimbal or the camera down to then start providing that situational awareness. And so that, I believe, in large part provided the comfort and reassurance that I'm not looking in Miss Smith's backyard. I'm not looking in people's bedroom windows. We are arriving to a call. Once we get to the call, at that point, we will then turn the camera down. And so that helped. The other part is we have a public facing dashboard so that the community can see the number of drone flights, the success of the program. And then we do everything we can through our social media platforms to highlight and celebrate the successes and wins so they can go in and see the actual video footage for themselves. So, we're not playing peekaboo. It's right there. You can go in and you can look at the full, 2 minute, 16-minute, whatever that mission time, flight time was, and you can see all of the drone footage. Now, clearly, if there's evidence, of a crime and those types of things, there's some redaction and different things that take place for the privacy of those involved to, include the suspect until, actually convicted of a crime. But that would be my recommendation to, any department considering a program is that, you need to be transparent. You need to utilize the dashboards and then partner with your local media. They want to celebrate our successes as well. Just last week, we had a bear on our municipal campus, and so we put the drone up and we watched the bear. We obviously locked down our municipal campus to keep people safe, but we were able to watch from 250 feet the bear kind of roam around. We have a slough behind us, so we watched the little bear cub run, jump in the water, go for a little swim, and then proceed north. Away from the populated area. Well, that was great because, of course, that was a non-enforcement related use of the drone. Everybody loves animals. A bear cub is cute to see it swim in the summertime, and we shipped that off to our local media, and it ran on just about every news station up here. So again, to show the community that that the uses of the drone outside of just public safety response, again, be it fire response, be it a bird's nest on a crane. There are a number of uses for this platform, and then it also shows your elected officials what they're paying for, right? That they're getting more bang for their buck than just response to calls, and not that that's an insignificant thing. But as I said, we've been able to cancel about 19% of our ground responses, so that keeps officers free and available for other calls. And that is if you want to call it the bread and butter, that is the cherry top of your drone program. It is keeping officers free for other emergency calls.
That's really powerful, and I think the more these successes are shared and championed, like you're doing, the easier it will be for everybody else to start their drone programs. Because maybe one of those stories is picked up by the national media, right? And then it plays, and then everyone's like, "Oh, I didn't know they're doing that drones." And then the more people like you guys are able to champion that, I think it just makes that all safer and makes it a lot easier for everybody to get their drone programs off the ground. Just kind of last question for you, just to kind of land the plane. If you were just starting your program, I had actually just spoken with a police chief in Pittsburgh area, and they just were looking at drones to buy and what licenses they need. I know that's could be hours of conversation around that, but if you were just to kind of give advice for somebody who's just starting the program, like where would you kind of point them first to get that off the ground?
Probably first and foremost is figure out what you're trying to solve for. Secondly, identify the funding source. Or if you can, kind of shoestring it together with a pilot to get your data first, and then approach your legislative body for the funding, because of course they're going to want it. They're going to want data. So that's how I built my program. I took it from within my own budgetary means, stood up the pilot, got the data, and then went to them with successes. That's one way of going about it. Obviously, getting your pilots certified, getting them through their Part 107, and then the practical application portion of it, because obviously you got to have the pilots to fly the program. So probably first and foremost, identifying the staff, find people that have a passion for it and are interested in it, but understand the pushback that you will get internally. Because you talk to any chief that's stood up a DFR program, and they will tell you that one of your pain points is the internal angst that it creates, because you're taking a body from patrol, you're taking a body from someplace else for this project. Conversely, once you get through the internal turbulence, it is very well received. Now you have officers asking, is Air One available? Is Air One available? And these were some of the same people that were complaining about the Chief's pet project back last year when we very first started this thing. Then the other thing is have very candid conversations with the vendors. There are a number of different platforms out there. I don't believe that there's necessarily a one size fits all. I believe that there are a couple of prominent vendors in this space that are showing great promise just by virtue of the number of agencies that they have flying missions. There are a number of other up and coming vendors out there that are on their first or maybe second iteration of an airframe or of a drone platform. So at the end of the day, it's what fits best for your community and who can get you the best deal. Right. And as we know, the most expensive is not necessarily always the best. And conversely, the least expensive doesn't mean it's the worst. Right. It's a use case type of circumstance. And if anyone out there wants to reach out, I'm more than happy to share what I believe is my knowledge, share our bumps and bruises that we have. And I will call balls and strikes. I don't advocate for one platform over the other. Thus, I've not mentioned specific names. But we have a lot of experience here in Redmond because, again, when we started this thing, my pilots touched every stick that was out there, and we flew just about every platform available before we made our decision. And it's very public. We're operating two different platforms right now, and I'm glad to speak directly with anybody that wants, like I said, to have a conversation with me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Chief Lowe, for joining today. And definitely, I'm sure they can find you on LinkedIn and or your website as well. And yeah, just definitely really value your insights and very excited to see where your drone program goes in the future.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Josh. I very much appreciate it.